David Carter was 35 years old and earning $62,000 a year as a high school history teacher when his father-in-law, Marcus Vance, threw his last bag of clothes out of the polished mahogany door of the penthouse apartment and into the rain-slicked hallway. The bag, a simple canvas duffel he'd had since college, landed with a soft, pathetic thud on the plush crimson runner. Outside, the New York sky wept a cold, relentless November rain. "And stay out," Marcus snarled, his voice a low growl that was meant to convey absolute authority. He was a man built of expensive materials, a bespoke suit, $8,000, a Swiss watch, $30,000, and a heart of polished granite. He stood in the doorway, blocking the warm, golden light from the home David had shared with his wife Simone for the past 5 years. Simone was just behind him, a silhouette of calculated sorrow. She didn't look at David. Her gaze was fixed on a point somewhere over his shoulder, as if studying the intricate weave of the hallway's designer wallpaper. Her silence was more damning than her father's rage. It was a silence of consent, of finality. Her mother, Eleanor, stood beside her, a hand on Simone's arm, her expression a mask of manufactured sympathy that didn't quite reach her cold, assessing eyes. She was wearing a silk blouse that probably cost more than David's monthly paycheck. David didn't say a word. He looked at the three of them, the united front of the Vance family, and felt a strange, hollow calm settle in his chest. Not anger, not sadness, not even betrayal, not yet. Just a cold, quiet clarity. He bent down, his knees cracking softly, and picked up the duffel bag. The canvas was already dark with moisture from the open doorway. He turned, walked the 50 feet down the hall to the private elevator, and pressed the down button. As the bronze doors slid shut, he saw his father-in-law close the apartment door with a decisive, echoing click. Down in the lobby, the doorman, a kind older man named Hector, watched him emerge. Hector's eyes were full of a pity David couldn't stand to see. He'd seen the Vances' casual cruelty for years, the subtle digs, the dismissive gestures. He knew. Everyone in the building knew. David was the charity case, the humble teacher who had married into a world that would never truly accept him. "Mr. Carter," Hector began, his voice soft, "do you need a cab? It's coming down hard." David shook his head. "No, thank you, Hector. I think I'll walk." He pushed through the heavy glass doors and stepped out into the deluge. The rain was immediate and shocking, plastering his thin cotton shirt to his skin in seconds. He didn't have a coat. It was inside, in the hall closet, next to Simone's collection of designer trenches. He didn't shiver. He just stood on the sidewalk, the rain washing over his face, and looked up. 22 floors up, the lights of his former home burned brightly, a warm, mocking beacon in the stormy darkness. He had no idea where he was going. He had $36 in his wallet and a life that had just been declared null and void. What he did have, however, was a secret so deep and so carefully guarded that not even his wife, the woman who shared his bed, knew it existed. And in that cold, drenching rain, the seed of that secret began to germinate, not into a plan for revenge, but a plan for justice. To understand how David arrived at that rain-soaked precipice, you have to go back 10 years to a university library where he'd first met Simone Vance. He was a graduate student in history, buried in dusty archives, fueled by cheap coffee and a passion for the past. She was in law school, sharp and ambitious, with a laugh that could fill a room and an energy that seemed to pull him out of his quiet shell. He was captivated. She was, she said, tired of the shallow, money-obsessed men in her social circle. She found his intellect refreshing, his quiet dedication to his work noble. Her parents, Marcus and Eleanor, had been skeptical from the start. They were real estate magnates, having inherited a portfolio of prime New York properties and expanded it with ruthless efficiency. They lived in a world of galas, boardrooms, and casual, seven-figure transactions. A history teacher to them was a curiosity, like a piece of quaint, unmarketable folk art. "What's the long-term plan with that?" Marcus had asked Simone once, a conversation David had unfortunately overheard during their first Christmas together. "Is this a phase, or do you actually intend to marry a man who considers tweed a fashion statement?" But Simone had defended him then. She had fought for him. Their love, she insisted, was more valuable than any portfolio. They married 2 years later in a lavish ceremony, funded entirely by her parents, a fact they never let David forget. As a wedding gift, they offered the couple the penthouse apartment in the Vance Tower, their flagship residential building on the Upper East Side. It was a gift with strings, a gilded cage. They would live there, rent-free, a constant reminder of the Vance's generosity and David's inability to provide such a lifestyle himself. For 5 years, David tried to make it work. He loved Simone, or at least he loved the woman he thought she was. He focused on his teaching, finding immense satisfaction in opening young minds to the complexities of the past. He would come home every day to their stunning apartment, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and panoramic views of the city, and feel like an imposter. Simone, who had joined a prestigious corporate law firm, slipped into her parents' world with ease. Her salary quickly eclipsed his, then doubled it, then tripled it. The woman who had once admired his noble profession began to see it as a liability. The humiliations were small at first, 1,000 tiny cuts. At dinner parties with her parents' friends, he would be introduced as Simone's husband, David. He's a teacher. The sentence always hung in the air, thick with unspoken judgment. When he talked about a historical event with passion, Eleanor would smile condescendingly and say, "It's so nice that you have a hobby you enjoy so much." Marcus was more direct. "62,000 a year," he'd said one night over a dinner of Chilean sea bass, $85 per plate, at a restaurant where the wine list started at $300. "I don't understand how a man can look at himself in the mirror earning that. My driver makes more." David would absorb these insults with a quiet stoicism that the Vances mistook for weakness. He never raised his voice. He never defended himself in the way they expected, with bluster and anger. He would simply meet their gaze with a calm, steady look that they couldn't quite decipher. He thought Simone would be his shield, but over time, she became a conduit for their disdain. "Why did you wear that suit, David?" she'd hiss in the car on the way home. "You know my father hates brown." The suit was his only one, a simple but well-made wool suit he'd bought for their wedding. "Can't you at least try to talk to my father's business partners?" she'd ask. "You just sit there? It's embarrassing." "I tried," he would say quietly. "I asked Mr. Abernathy about his company's history. He wasn't interested." "Of course he wasn't interested in that," she'd snap. "He's interested in mergers and capital gains, David. Things that matter." The apartment itself became a weapon. It was their property, their domain. Eleanor would let herself in with her own key, rearranging furniture, replacing the simple coffee maker David liked with a complicated Italian espresso machine, $2,500. He never learned how to use. "Just a little upgrade, darling," she'd say, smiling brightly. This place was starting to look a little scholastic. Every object in their home was a testament to the Vance fortune. The art on the walls was chosen by Eleanor's decorator. The furniture was from a showroom Marcus favored. The very air seemed to belong to them. David's only space was his small study, a room lined with books he'd collected since he was a teenager. It was his sanctuary. One day he came home to find it transformed. The old, comfortable leather chair was gone, replaced by a sleek, minimalist steel and leather contraption, that was impossible to relax in. His sturdy oak desk had been swapped for a glass table. Mom thought it needed a more modern, professional look, Simone explained, avoiding his eyes. Doesn't it look better? He looked at the sterile, impersonal space, a room that no longer felt like his. He felt a profound sense of erasure. He was being systematically removed from his own life, piece by piece. The final fracture began, as so many do, with money. David's grandfather had passed away 3 years prior, leaving him a modest inheritance of $75,000. It was the entirety of the old man's life savings, scraped together from a lifetime of working as a mechanic. To David, it was a sacred trust. He didn't tell Simone or her parents about it. He knew exactly what they would do: dismiss it as a paltry sum, or worse, suggest ways to spend it on things that mattered to them: a new watch for him, a down payment on a luxury car. Instead, David contacted a man his grandfather had trusted, a quiet, shrewd financial advisor named Arthur Henderson. Mr. Henderson was old school, a man who believed in value, patience, and discretion. He saw in David the same quiet intelligence he'd respected in his grandfather. $75,000 isn't a fortune, son, Mr. Henderson had said, peering at him over his spectacles in his modest wood-paneled office. But it's a seed. What do you want to grow? David didn't want to grow a stock portfolio. He wanted to grow an idea. For years, he'd been doing freelance historical research on the side. He had a rare talent for digging through archives, for finding the one forgotten document or obscure letter that could change the understanding of a historical narrative. He'd helped a few authors and graduate students mostly for free, just for the love of the puzzle. I want to start a business, David told him. A historical consultancy. We'd verify provenance for auction houses, consult for film productions on historical accuracy, help wealthy families trace their genealogy. Mr. Henderson had leaned back, a slow smile spreading across his face. Niche, high margin, low overhead. I like it. For the next 3 years, David lived a double life. By day, he was Mr. Carter, the dedicated high school teacher. By night and on weekends, he was the founder and sole researcher of the Carter Historical Group. He worked out of a tiny, rented desk space across town. Mr. Henderson helped him structure the business and invested the inheritance in a way that provided a small but steady stream of operating capital. The business didn't explode overnight. It grew slowly, organically, built on the quality of David's work and his unimpeachable reputation. His first big break came from a film studio that was producing a major period drama. The script was riddled with inaccuracies. David submitted a 200-page report detailing every error, from the type of buttons on a soldier's uniform to the political slang used in a parliamentary debate. The director was so impressed, he hired David as the lead historical consultant for the entire production. The fee was more than his annual teaching salary. From there, the business snowballed. Auction houses hired him to verify the authenticity of Civil War artifacts. Tech billionaires paid him handsome sums to create detailed leather-bound books of their family histories. A European museum paid him a fortune to locate a series of lost letters from a 17th century philosopher. He was, in his small, specialized world, becoming a superstar. He funneled every dollar back into the business and into investments guided by Mr. Henderson. He never changed his lifestyle. He still drove his 10-year-old Honda. He still wore his simple, bistro comfortable clothes. He still found joy in teaching teenagers about the fall of Rome. The money wasn't the point. The work was the point. The independence was the point. The money was just a tool, a resource he was quietly accumulating, like a secret reservoir of power. He had, in 3 short years, built a company worth several $1 million and a personal investment portfolio that was growing at an astonishing rate. His net worth was now quietly, secretly, in the 8 figures. And no one knew. The Vances and Simone saw only what they wanted to see. The humble teacher, the man in the brown suit, the financial dependent living in their building. His quietness was not seen as the discipline of a man building an empire in secret, but as the meekness of a man who knew his place. This profound underestimation was the greatest gift they could have ever given him. If you're finding yourself invested in David's story and believe that quiet strength is a superpower, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We share new stories every single day that explore justice and vindication, and you won't want to miss how this one unfolds. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from around the world. The breaking point, the moment that led to the rainy night on the sidewalk, was an argument over a vacation. The Vances had booked a family trip to a private island in the Caribbean, a place where a single night's stay cost $5,000. David was expected to come. "I can't go, Simone," he had told her gently a week before the trip. "We have parent-teacher conferences that week and then final exams. It's the most important time of the school year." Simone had stared at him, her expression hardening. "You can't be serious? You're choosing a bunch of teenagers over your family? Over me?" "It's not a choice," he said. "It's my job. My responsibility." "Your job," she scoffed, the word dripping with condescension. "David, my father is chartering a private jet. My mother has bought you a whole new wardrobe for the trip. Everything is paid for. All you have to do is show up." "And that's the problem, isn't it?" he said, his voice still quiet but with a new edge of steel. "Everything is always paid for. Everything is a gift from them. We don't have a life, Simone. We have a sponsorship." It was the first time he had ever articulated the thought so clearly, and the truth of it hung in the air between them, sharp and undeniable. Simone's face, for a fleeting moment, registered shock. Then it was replaced by a cold fury. "How dare you," she whispered, "after everything my parents have done for you, for us. They gave us this home. They've given us a life you could never have dreamed of providing." "I did dream of providing a life, Simone," he said. "A life we would build together. It might not have been in a penthouse, but it would have been ours." The argument escalated. Simone called her parents. Of course she did. They were her board of directors, her ultimate authority. They arrived within the hour, dressed for battle. Marcus was in his corporate armor, Eleanor in her cloak of passive aggression. They didn't come to mediate, they came to litigate. The scene in the living room was a masterclass in psychological warfare. It wasn't a shouting match. It was a calm, brutal dissection of David's character and his value as a man. "It's about gratitude, David," Eleanor said, her voice dripping with disappointment. "We have given you so much. We welcomed you into our family, and you repay us with this sullen ingratitude." "It's not about gratitude, Eleanor," David replied, meeting her gaze. "It's about respect, and you've never respected me." Marcus stepped forward, his presence filling the room. "Respect is earned, son. It's earned through success, through providing. What have you provided? You live in my building. You eat the food my money buys. You go on vacations I pay for. You are a passenger in your own life. And now you have the audacity to complain about the quality of the ride." He turned to Simone. "I told you this would happen. A man with no ambition will eventually resent the ambition of those around him. He wants to drag you down to his level because he's incapable of rising to yours." David watched Simone's face as her father spoke. He saw her resolve harden. He saw her choose. She looked at him, and the woman he had loved, the law student who had admired his intellect in the library, was gone. In her place was a Vance, her features settling into the familiar family expression of cool, transactional appraisal. "He's right, David," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "I can't do this anymore. I can't live this half-life pretending that your job is as important as my career, that your contributions are equal to my family's. It's a lie." That was the moment David knew his marriage was over. It wasn't a death by 1,000 cuts. It was a clinical, decisive execution. "So what happens now?" he asked, his voice a flat monotone. "Now," Marcus said, stepping between David and his daughter, a physical barrier of wealth and power. "You leave. This apartment, this life, it belongs to us. You came with nothing. You'll leave with nothing. Go back to whatever world you crawled out of." And that's what he did. He went to his study, the sterile room that no longer felt like his, packed the few clothes and books that were still identifiably his own into his old college duffel bag, and walked out. They stood there, the three of them, watching him go, their faces a mixture of triumph and relief. The problem had been excised. The family unit was pure again. The weeks after he was thrown out were a blur. David stayed on a friend's couch, a fellow teacher who asked no questions and offered quiet solidarity. He continued to go to work every day, losing himself in lesson plans and the reassuring rhythm of the school bell. The Vances, he was sure, expected him to fall apart, to beg, to plead. He did none of those things. He did not call. He did not text. He simply disappeared from their lives, just as they had demanded. 2 weeks after that night, a sleek, expensive envelope arrived at the school. It was from Simone's lawyer. She was filing for divorce on the grounds of irreconcilable differences. The enclosed legal document was a work of art in its cruelty. It outlined a proposed settlement in which David would waive all rights to any and all assets acquired during the marriage, acknowledging that they were products of the Vance family's largesse. It was a document designed to codify his worthlessness, to get his signature on a statement that he agreed he had brought nothing to the table and therefore deserved nothing. David read the document, then folded it neatly and placed it in his briefcase. That evening, he didn't go to his friend's apartment. He went to the small, anonymous office of the Carter Historical Group. He sat at his desk, surrounded by the quiet company of old books and historical maps, and he made a phone call. "Mr. Henderson," he said, when the older man answered, "It's David Carter." "David? I was wondering when you'd call. I heard about what happened. I'm sorry, son." "Don't be," David said, his voice calm and clear. "They've just given me the one thing I needed most, motivation. I need you to liquidate a few of the index funds. I need $7 million in liquid capital by the end of the week." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "That's an aggressive move, David. What are you planning?" "The Vance family real estate portfolio is managed by a holding company, Vance Properties LLC, isn't it?" "That's right," Mr. Henderson said, his voice now sharp with interest. "I've been doing some research," David continued, pulling up a file on his computer. "They're over-leveraged. They took out a massive loan 2 years ago to finance a new commercial development downtown that's behind schedule and over budget. Their liquidity is tight. I believe their flagship property, the Vance Tower, is carrying more debt than they've let on." "You've done your homework," Mr. Henderson said, a note of admiration in his voice. "History is all about homework," David replied. "I want you to form a shell corporation. I want you to approach Marcus Vance with an all-cash offer for Vance Properties LLC, the entire company. I want you to offer him a price that is just high enough for his pride to let him accept it, but a price that, in the long run, will be the bargain of a lifetime." "You want to buy the company that owns the building you were just thrown out of?" Mr. Henderson asked, a slow chuckle in his voice. "I don't just want to buy the building," David said, looking out his office window at the glittering cityscape. "I want to own their world, and then I want to set new terms. The plan was set in motion with a speed and precision that would have shocked the Vances. Mr. Henderson, through a front man at a major investment bank, created a Delaware-based corporation with an inscrutable name, the Archimedes Group. The name was David's idea. Archimedes was the Greek scholar who said, "Give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum on which to place it, and I shall move the world." David's knowledge was his lever. His capital was his fulcrum. The offer was made to Marcus Vance on a Tuesday morning. It was a masterful piece of financial theater. The number was carefully calculated, high enough to be seen as a serious, even generous offer that would solve his company's underlying cash flow problems, but not so high as to arouse suspicion. Marcus, blinded by his own arrogance and the sudden appearance of a lifeline, saw it as a victory. He believed he was outsmarting some anonymous foreign investor, selling off his assets at the peak of the market. He bragged to his friends that he was cashing out, moving on to bigger and better things. He and Eleanor celebrated the sale with a lavish party. David knew this because he saw photos of it in a society magazine. There was Simone, smiling, on the arm of a new man, a hedge fund manager with a predatory smile and a designer suit identical to her father's. The caption read, "Simone Vance, celebrating her family's latest business triumph." The divorce was proceeding quietly. David, through his own lawyer, didn't contest the insulting settlement offer. He countered with a simple, clean proposal, a no-fault dissolution, with each party keeping their own assets and debts. Simone's lawyer, stunned by the lack of a fight, agreed immediately. They thought he was running away, tail between his legs. The divorce was finalized in a matter of weeks. David Carter was officially, legally, excised from the Vance family. He signed the papers, his hand steady. For the next 3 months, David was a ghost. He moved into a modest apartment downtown. He continued teaching. He continued running his business, which was now attracting international clients. The sale of Vance Properties LLC to the Archimedes Group closed without a hitch. Marcus and Eleanor Vance received a wire transfer for a staggering sum of money, but a sum that was, in reality, about 70% of the portfolio's true market value. They were rich, but they were no longer powerful in the way that mattered most to them. They were no longer landlords. They were no longer kings of their castle. They were merely tenants. They continued to live in the penthouse of the Vance Tower, the building that no longer bore their name. It was now simply 142 East 78th Street. They had negotiated a 1-year rent-free continuation of their residence as part of the sale agreement, a final, prideful perk. After that, they would have to either move or begin paying the market rate. They assumed they could easily renegotiate with the new, faceless owners. They were the Vances, after all. Rules were for other people. The first sign that things had changed came in the form of a memo, slipped under the doors of every resident in the building. It was printed on thick, creamy cardstock, with an elegant, minimalist letterhead that simply said, "The Archimedes Group." The memo was polite and professional. It introduced the new ownership and outlined a few minor changes to building protocols. It mentioned upcoming renovations to the lobby and gym. It was standard corporate communication. But it was the final sentence, and the signature beneath it, that changed everything. The sentence read, "All residents with questions or concerns regarding this transition are welcome to contact the new owner directly." Below the sentence was a printed name and a simple, elegant signature, David Carter. The scene, as it was later described to David by a gleeful Hector the doorman, was one for the ages. Marcus Vance came down to the lobby to collect his morning paper, dressed in his silk robe and slippers. He saw the memo on the concierge desk and picked one up, scanning it with a dismissive air. He read it once. Then he read it again. Hector said the color drained from Marcus's face, leaving it a sickly, mottled gray. His hands began to shake so violently that he dropped the memo. He stumbled back, his hand flying to his chest as if he'd been struck. At that moment, Eleanor and Simone came out of the elevator, laughing about some brunch plan. They saw Marcus, his face a mask of horror, and rushed to his side. "Marcus, darling, what is it? Are you all right?" Eleanor cried. Simone picked up the fallen memo. She read the final line. Her reaction was different, not shock, but a dawning, chilling comprehension. Her face went blank, all the carefully constructed confidence and arrogance wiped away, replaced by a raw, unvarnished dread. She looked around the lobby, at the marble floors, at the polished brass, at the life she had taken for granted, and saw it all through new eyes. It wasn't hers, it was his. The first phone call came 10 minutes later. It was Simone. David was in his office, reviewing a 16th century manuscript. He let it ring 3 times before answering. "Hello?" he said, his voice perfectly calm. "David? David, what is this? What have you done?" Her voice was a frantic, high-pitched squeal he'd never heard before. The cool, controlled lawyer was gone, replaced by a panicked, cornered animal. "I'm not sure what you mean, Simone," he said, leaning back in his chair. "The memo. This joke. You bought the building? How could you buy the building?" "With money, Simone," he said simply. "It's a transactional process. Your father should be familiar with it." He signed the papers. There was a choked sound on the other end of the line. This is impossible. You're a teacher. You make nothing." "I was a teacher," he corrected her gently. "I resigned last week to focus on my business full time. And you're right, I didn't make much as a teacher, but it was enough." "Enough for what?" she shrieked. "To buy a $200 million property portfolio? It's amazing what you can accomplish when you live modestly and have a clear goal," he said. The line was silent for a moment. He could hear her ragged breathing. He could hear Marcus shouting in the background. "Why are you doing this?" she finally whispered, her voice cracking. "Is this revenge? To humiliate us?" This was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment to draw the distinction. "No, Simone," he said, and his voice was not cold, but it was not warm either. It was the voice of absolute finality. "This isn't revenge. Revenge is cruel. This is accountability. Your father built his world on the idea that a person's worth is measured by their bank account. He taught you that lesson well. I'm simply asking you all to live by your own rules. I am the owner. You are the tenants. The relationship is now clear." But our home," she stammered. "You have a lease," he said. "A contract. I'm a great believer in the sanctity of contracts. I'm sure you, as a lawyer, are as well. Your current agreement, which my predecessor so generously granted, allows you to stay in the penthouse, rent-free, for 1 more year. After that, the lease will be up for renewal at the current market rate." "The market rate?" she whispered. "The market rate for the penthouse is $40,000 a month." "That's correct," David said. "I look forward to receiving your decision on whether to renew in due course. Have a wonderful day, Simone." He hung up the phone. He felt nothing. Not triumph, not satisfaction, just the quiet, clean feeling of a long, unbalanced equation finally being solved. Make sure you're subscribed because the story of the Vance's downfall is just beginning. What do you think David should do when their lease is up? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that like button if you're enjoying this tale of justice. The aftermath was a slow, agonizing collapse for the Vance family, a public dismantling of an empire built on arrogance. The news that the quiet, dismissed teacher had bought out his former father-in-law swept through their social circle like a wildfire. Marcus Vance, the titan of real estate, became a laughingstock. The man who had been outmaneuvered by the son-in-law he called a loser. His friends, the ones who had patted him on the back at dinner parties, now avoided his calls. Deals he had been working on mysteriously fell through. The aura of invincibility that had been his most valuable asset was gone, and he discovered, to his horror, that without it, he was just another man with a dwindling bank account. They couldn't afford the $40,000 a month rent, of course. The money from the sale, which had seemed like a fortune, was quickly being eaten away by their lavish lifestyle, a lifestyle they didn't know how to stop living. They were forced to move. They downsized from the penthouse to a small, respectable, but utterly humiliating two-bedroom apartment on the west side. The moving trucks were a public spectacle. Hector, the doorman, told David that Eleanor Vance had cried the entire time, hiding her face behind oversized sunglasses. Simone's life unraveled as well. The hedge fund manager, the man who was supposed to be her upgrade, disappeared the moment the story broke. He was attracted to the Vance power and prestige, not to Simone herself. Without it, she was just another lawyer. Her firm, embarrassed by the scandal and her family's fall from grace, shifted her off the partner track and onto a dead-end corporate compliance team. She was marginalized, a ghost, haunting the hallways of the career she had sacrificed her marriage for. David, meanwhile, flourished. He did not become a recluse or a gloating villain. He became a quiet force for good. He used the profits from his real estate holdings and the continued success of the Carter Historical Group to start a foundation. The Carter Foundation provided full scholarships for promising history students from low-income backgrounds, giving them the chance to pursue their passion without the crushing weight of debt. He named the scholarship after the grandfather who had left him the $75,000. The seed from which everything had grown. He saw Simone one last time, about a year after the sale. He was walking through Central Park on a crisp autumn afternoon. She was sitting on a bench, alone, staring at the lake. She looked smaller, diminished. Her expensive clothes seemed to hang off her like a costume she no longer knew how to wear. She saw him and flinched, as if expecting a blow. He just nodded at her, a simple, neutral gesture of acknowledgement, and kept walking. There was nothing left to say. He didn't hate her. He didn't pity her. She was simply a figure from a past he had survived, a chapter in a book he had finished reading. As he walked, the setting sun cast long shadows across the grass. He thought about the nature of wealth. The Vances had believed wealth was a weapon, a shield, a marker of superiority. They used it to dominate, to control, to insulate themselves from the world, but they had built their house on sand. Their wealth was hollow, transactional, and when it was gone, there was nothing left of them. David had learned that true wealth was something else entirely. It was purpose. It was the freedom to pursue a passion. It was the ability to build something that would outlast you, to create opportunities for others, to turn a private success into a public good. It wasn't about owning buildings. It was about building futures. The Vances had thrown him out into the rain, believing they were casting him into the darkness. They never understood that they were actually setting him free, allowing him to step out from under their shadow and into the light of his own making. And in that light, he found not revenge, but a quiet, unshakable, and deeply satisfying peace. Justice, he had learned, is not about punishing the wicked. It is about the righteous finally getting the chance to flourish. Thank you for joining us for this story. If you believe in the power of patience, strategy, and character, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more daily stories of emotional justice. Tell us what lesson you took from David's journey in the comments below. We love hearing from you.